When you go silent with dignity, the first thing that happens is not peace in her mind, but awareness. Awareness of absence, awareness of loss, awareness of something that is no longer there to comfort, validate, or reassure her. While you were present, your attention, your energy, your consistency were familiar. They became part of her emotional environment. And the human mind only truly understands the value of something when it is removed. Your silence creates a vacuum, and a vacuum forces the mind to look inward. There are no more messages to distract her, no more reactions to lean on, no more emotional access to you. And in that quiet, the weight of your absence becomes loud. She begins to notice the space you once filled, the good mornings that are no longer there, the emotional safety that quietly existed, the presence that grounded her more than she realized. At first, it may feel like freedom to her, relief, a sense of control. But as days pass and your silence remains calm, unbothered, and complete, a different emotion surfaces: curiosity, then reflection, then comparison, and finally realization. Silence does something arguments never can. It removes stimulation, it removes noise, and when noise disappears, the mind starts replaying memories, moments, conversations, feelings. She starts to remember how you made her feel, not how she made you feel. She starts to feel the emotional contrast between then and now. And this is where regret begins its slow burn. Not because you are trying to punish her, not because you are manipulating, but because your absence forces her to confront what your presence meant. You did not beg, you did not chase, you did not try to convince her of your worth. You simply removed your energy, and energy, once gone, reveals its value. A man who walks away in silence communicates something powerful. I respect myself enough to not explain my value to someone who couldn't see it. That self-respect is what echoes in her mind. She begins to feel the difference between men who argue to stay and men who calmly leave. One leaks need, the other radiates strength. Your silence tells her you are not broken. You are not waiting. You are not emotionally stuck. You are moving forward. And that is what creates the emotional pressure. Not guilt, but contrast. The contrast between what she has now and what she had with you. When a man disappears in peace, it creates a psychological imbalance. The ego expects reaction. It expects pursuit. It expects explanation. When it gets none, it is forced to ask, why was I not worth chasing? And that question strikes deeper than any argument ever could. She may try to rationalize at first. She may tell herself she made the right decision. She may distract herself, but silence is patient. It does not argue. It does not chase. It simply remains. And over time, the emotional mind begins to surface what logic tries to suppress. She starts to feel the loss of your emotional stability, the calm presence, the grounded masculine energy that did not fluctuate with her moods. She realizes that not every man provides peace, consistency, and quiet strength. Some provide excitement, but few provide emotional grounding. And now that grounding is gone. Silence also removes your validation from her identity. She no longer feels seen by you, no longer feels chosen by you, no longer feels emotionally held by your attention. And that can shake a woman's sense of desirability more than she admits. Not because she needs validation, but because she valued being valued by you. The regret does not come from loneliness alone. It comes from the realization that she lost access to a man who did not lose himself, a man who did not collapse, a man who did not beg, a man who simply walked away with composure. And composure is unforgettable. Your silence allows her to feel the full emotional consequence of her choices, not through punishment, but through absence, not through anger, but through dignity. And dignity has weight, because when a man leaves quietly, he leaves a standard behind, a standard of how he should have been treated, a standard of what was available and is no longer accessible. And that is when regret begins to burn, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply, slowly, internally, because what hurts most is not losing someone who needed you, it is losing someone who didn't. When you choose silence instead of reaction, what you are really showing is emotional mastery. And emotional mastery is one of the rarest forms of strength. Most people cannot sit in discomfort without trying to fix it, explain it, or control it. Most people react, they defend, they justify, they chase closure, they seek validation. But when you remain silent, calm, and unmoved, you communicate something far deeper than words ever could. You are in control of yourself. Not reacting tells her that your emotions are not running you. You are not being pulled into drama. You are not trying to win an argument. You are not trying to be understood at any cost. You are not trying to force an outcome. You are simply grounded in your own center, and that groundedness sends a powerful psychological signal. I am not shaken by this. A man who reacts emotionally is easy to read. His buttons are visible. His wounds are exposed. His need for resolution is obvious. But a man who stays silent, composed, and steady becomes unreadable. And what is unreadable becomes heavy in the mind. She starts to wonder what you are feeling, what you are thinking, why you are not trying to pull her back. That curiosity is mixed with something deeper: respect. Because emotional control is respect-worthy. It shows maturity. It shows strength. It shows that you are not governed by impulse. You are not desperate for comfort. You are not trying to ease your own anxiety by forcing communication. You are allowing the situation to be what it is without losing your internal balance. Silence in this context is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is restraint, and restraint is a form of power. It says, I do not need to prove anything. I do not need to explain myself. I do not need to chase understanding from someone who chose distance. This non-reaction creates a psychological contrast. She may expect emotion. She may expect anger, sadness, pleading, or explanation. When she gets none, her expectations collapse. And when expectations collapse, the mind starts searching for meaning. Why isn't he reacting? Why isn't he trying to fix this? Why does he seem so unaffected? These questions can be more unsettling than any argument. Your silence also communicates self-respect. You are not engaging in emotional bargaining. You are not trying to convince her of your worth. You are not lowering your standards to keep a connection alive. You are standing in the quiet confidence that your value does not need to be negotiated. And this is where regret begins to grow its roots. Because deep down, she understands what your silence means. It means you are not afraid to lose her, not in a cold way, but in a self-respecting way. It means your sense of self does not depend on her response. It means you are complete enough to walk away without breaking. That level of independence is rare. Most men collapse when connection is threatened. They become emotional. They become reactive. They become anxious. But you did not. You remained steady. And steadiness in moments of emotional tension is felt as strength. Your non-reaction also denies her emotional control over you. You are not being pulled into a push and pull dynamic. You are not feeding conflict. You are not reinforcing drama. You are simply stepping out of the emotional storm. And when one person steps out of the storm has nowhere to go. She may not admit it, but a part of her expected you to react. Expected you to show that she still had power over your emotions. When that reaction does not come, it creates an internal shift. The power dynamic changes. You are no longer the one seeking emotional resolution. You are the one who is emotionally resolved within himself. And that can be unsettling, because it forces her to face the possibility that she did not break you, did not shake you, did not define you. You remained whole without her, and that realization can sting. Silence also leaves no emotional mess behind, no harsh words, no dramatic scenes, no regretful outbursts. Just a clean, calm exit. And a clean exit is hard to forget. It leaves room for reflection instead of resentment. It leaves space for memory instead of conflict. Over time, she begins to associate you not with chaos, but with composure, not with weakness, but with strength, not with need, but with self-control. And those associations linger. They quietly grow. They become the standard by which future men are measured. Because a man who can control his emotions can control his life. And a man who can walk away without emotional noise is a man who cannot be easily replaced in the mind. Your silence is not empty. It is full of strength. When silence settles in, her mind does not go quiet. It becomes louder, louder with memories, with moments, with the emotional echoes of what once was. Distraction fades and reflection begins. Without your presence, without your messages, without your emotional availability, the mind naturally drifts backward. It replays, it reconsiders, it reevaluates. She starts remembering how you made her feel. Not the arguments, not the tension, but the calm, the safety, the laughter, the stability, the way your presence grounded her more than she realized at the time. The human mind has a powerful tendency to romanticize what is no longer accessible, and silence removes access. In that space, her thoughts return to the potential that once existed, the version of the future that could have unfolded. The support she felt, the consistency you brought, the emotional strength that was there when things were uncertain. And now, in your absence, she begins to compare. She compares what she had with what she has now. She compares the depth of your presence with the surface, level attention of others. She compares the emotional safety you offered with the instability that often follows, and comparison is where regret begins to sharpen. Your silence does not remind her of what she lost through words. It reminds her through absence. And absence has a way of highlighting value. What was once familiar becomes rare. What was once taken for granted becomes irreplaceable. The small things you did, the way you listened, the way you understood, the way you remained steady, these details grow larger in memory. Her mind begins to connect dots it once ignored. She starts to see patterns, your patience, your consistency, your willingness to stand in your truth without forcing it on her. These qualities, once invisible in the comfort of your presence, become clear in your absence. And then comes the what if. What if she had tried harder? What if she had communicated better? What if she had valued what she had instead of assuming it would always be there? These questions are not loud, they are quiet, persistent. They surface in moments of stillness, in late nights, in emotional pauses. Silence also removes emotional closure. There is no final conversation to wrap everything neatly, no dramatic ending to define the story. The lack of closure leaves the mind searching for resolution. And when the mind searches, it replays. Over and over, it fills in gaps. It imagines alternate outcomes. She may remember the way you looked at her when you were fully present, the way your voice sounded when you were calm, the way your energy made her feel seen and secure. These sensory memories become anchors, and anchors pull the mind back. Your absence becomes a mirror. It reflects what was lost not through blame, but through contrast, the contrast between being emotionally held and being emotionally alone. The contrast between a man who is stable in a world that feels less grounded. And because you did not leave in chaos, because there was no dramatic explosion, the memory of you is not poisoned by resentment. It is clean. It is calm. It is strong, and clean memories linger longer. Over time, the emotional weight of what could have been begins to press, not in a painful way at first, but in a reflective one, a soft ache, a quiet sense that something valuable slipped away. This is where regret becomes real, not as self-punishment, but as realization, the realization that not all connections are replaceable, that not every man brings the same emotional depth, that what you offered was not common. Silence gives her the space to feel this fully, without interference, without distraction, without your presence softening the loss. She must sit with it. And in sitting with it, she understands. She understands that some men come into a woman's life as experiences. Others come as standards. And the ones who leave with dignity, with strength, with emotional control often become the standard. She begins to measure others against the memory of your calm, your steadiness, your presence. And most will fall short. Not because they are bad, but because they are not you. And this is how regret takes root. Not through pain alone, but through comparison. Not through anger, but through memory. Not through drama, but through the quiet realization of what was lost and cannot easily be replaced. Silence gives her time to remember. When she sees you moving forward, focused, disciplined, and at peace without her, the emotional contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Your life does not collapse. Your world does not shrink. Your energy does not fade. Instead, it grows stronger, more centered, more purposeful. And that is when regret deepens, because it reveals something painful. She was not the source of your strength, but she could have shared in it. A man who rises after silence sends a powerful message without ever speaking. He shows that his value was never dependent on being chosen. His confidence was never borrowed. His stability was never conditional. He was grounded before, and he is grounded now. And this realization hits differently than words ever could. At first, she may assume you are hurting. She may expect signs of longing, sadness, or emotional struggle. But when time passes and she sees you thriving, something shifts inside her. The narrative changes. She realizes that you did not lose yourself in her. You did not pause your growth. You did not spiral. You continued. And that continuation becomes a mirror. A mirror that reflects what could have been shared. The peace, the strength, the direction, the emotional safety of being with a man who knows who he is and where he is going. She begins to feel the weight of the opportunity that slipped through her fingers. This is where regret transforms from a thought into a feeling. Not just, I miss him, but I lost something solid. Not just, he was good to me, but he was becoming more and I am no longer part of that journey. Your progress highlights your value. Your calm highlights your maturity. Your forward movement highlights your independence. and independence is deeply attractive, but it is also deeply humbling when it is no longer accessible. She may scroll, hear about you, or simply imagine you living your life. And with each image, each thought, a quiet realization grows. You did not need her to become better, but she could have benefited from being with you while you did. That contrast creates emotional friction. The mind begins to compare timelines. The one where she stayed, the one where she left, the one where she was part of your growth, the one where she watches from the outside. And the weight of that comparison can be heavy. Regret does not come from seeing you suffer. It comes from seeing you succeed. It comes from realizing that the man she once had access to is now becoming even stronger, wiser, more centered, and she is no longer beside him. And because you left with dignity, because there was no chaos, no bitterness, no emotional collapse, the image of you remains clean and powerful. You are not associated with drama. You are associated with growth. And growth is attractive. She begins to understand that you were not just a moment. You were a foundation. You were not just attention. You were stability. You were not just presence. You were potential. And now that potential is unfolding without her. That realization can be quiet, but it is sharp. It is the feeling of watching a door close while knowing what was on the other side. Not because you slammed it, but because time moved on. Your peace becomes the proof of your strength. Your progress becomes the evidence of your worth. Your silence becomes the space where her regret grows. Because the hardest thing to accept is not that someone left, it is that they left and still became more. When you walk away in silence, without anger, without blame, without trying to be understood, you are not just leaving a person, you are setting a standard. A standard for how you allow yourself to be treated. A standard for what you tolerate. A standard for the level of respect and effort required to have access to you. And that standard does not fade when you leave. It stays behind. Your absence becomes a lesson, not spoken but felt. It teaches her that indifference has a cost, that inconsistency has a cost, that taking someone's presence for granted eventually leads to losing it. And because you did not argue or chase, the lesson is clean. There is no emotional noise to distract from the truth. A man who walks away calmly is a man who is not willing to negotiate his self-respect. He is not trying to be understood by someone who chose not to understand him. He is not trying to prove his value to someone who did not recognize it. He simply removes himself from what no longer aligns. This creates a powerful internal reckoning. She begins to realize that access to you was not unconditional, that your presence was not guaranteed, that your loyalty, your energy, your emotional investment required respect and reciprocity. And now that it is gone, the cost becomes clear. Boundaries are often invisible while they are being respected, but the moment they are crossed and the person enforcing them walks away, their weight is finally felt. Your silence is not punishment, it is consequence. And consequence teaches more than confrontation ever could. She may begin to replay moments where she was distant, dismissive, or inconsistent, not with guilt at first, but with awareness that you did not react emotionally, you did not argue, you did not demand. You simply chose not to remain where your value was not fully met. That choice speaks of standards, and standards create respect, even if they are realized too late. Your calm exit shows that you do not tolerate half-effort, mixed signals, or emotional ambiguity. You do not chase clarity from someone who offers confusion. You do not beg for consistency from someone who is inconsistent. You simply step away. This forces her to confront something uncomfortable, the possibility that she lost access to a man who knew his worth and acted accordingly. Not with ego, not with bitterness, but with quiet certainty. And that realization lingers. It becomes a reference point, a reminder that not every man will stay. Not every man will accept emotional imbalance. Not every man will tolerate being an option instead of a priority. Your boundaries, once enforced, become a silent teacher. They show her what it costs to lose a man who respects himself. And that lesson does not disappear. It stays with her in future interactions, future relationships, future choices. She may not say it out loud. She may not even fully admit it to herself. But deep down, she knows your absence is not random. It is the result of a line that was crossed, a standard that was not met. And that is where regret sharpens. Not just regret for losing you, but regret for not meeting the level of respect and effort that you quietly required. Because the men who leave loudly are remembered as emotional. The men who leave calmly are remembered as standards. When you leave in silence and continue forward with strength, Something powerful happens in her perception of you. You stop being just a memory and become a standard. You are no longer just the man she once knew. You become the reference point against which future men are measured, and that is far heavier than being missed. Memories fade. Standards do not. A memory is emotional, soft, and distant. A standard is present, active, and comparative. When she meets someone new, she does not just recall you, she feels the absence of what you represented. Your emotional stability, your composure, your self-respect, your ability to walk away without chaos. And in that comparison, your weight remains. Because you did not beg, you did not argue, you did not try to prove yourself. You did not collapse. You left with dignity, and dignity imprints deeply. It creates a lasting psychological marker of how a man with self-worth moves. When a man stays despite being undervalued, he becomes a lesson in tolerance. When a man leaves when respect is missing, he becomes a lesson in standards, and lessons in standards stay alive in the mind long after emotions settle. She may go on to meet men who give attention, who pursue, who promise. But something will feel different. The calm strength you carried, the emotional steadiness, the lack of neediness, the way you held your ground, these qualities are not common, and once experienced they become the baseline. She may find men who are loud, who chase, who demand, who seek validation, and unconsciously she will compare, not out of nostalgia but out of contrast, and in that contrast your presence is felt. This is not about ego, it is about impact. A man who leaves with self-respect leaves behind an imprint of what emotional maturity looks like. And that imprint reshapes expectations. Your silence becomes the proof of your strength. Your absence becomes the measure of your value. Not because you disappeared, but because you did not disappear into weakness. You did not leave a trail of emotional chaos. You left clarity. You left the realization that not every man will stay when his boundaries are crossed. Not every man will fight to be undervalued. Not every man will sacrifice his self-worth to keep a connection alive. And that realization alters how she perceives men going forward. She becomes more aware of emotional stability, more sensitive to self-respect, more conscious of boundaries. Because once you have experienced a man who walks away in peace, the noise of men who chase in insecurity becomes more obvious. You become the quiet benchmark, the example of what it looks like when a man chooses himself without bitterness, without resentment, without drama. And in that way, you are no longer just part of her past. You are part of her internal standard for what a grounded, self-respecting man feels like. That is the final layer of regret. Not just missing you, but realizing that the version of connection you offered is rare, that the emotional safety, strength, and dignity you embodied is not easily found. She may move on. She may smile. She may live her life. But somewhere in the background of her emotional world, your standard remains. Because the man who leaves with strength is not easily replaced. He is quietly remembered.